Dear audience, we are on the start of the third day of the Advancing Computer Games Conference 2023. My name is Jaap van der Herik, and I'm your session chair for the fourth keynote speech given by Tristan Cazenave. Before we start with my introduction of Cazenave, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers for this conference, but especially I make an exception to Jonathan Schaefer. He did very, very well, and I'm very happy with the fact that he did it so smoothly and so, I will say, what I can see, perfectly. And that is a compliment. And a compliment should be given at the end of this conference, but I know at the end sometimes everybody has to say something, and I thought now it is the opportunity to make everything in one and to have this, I would say, words of thanks at the beginning, yes? That is my point. But I would like to say that because of, I would say, his services for the ICCA in general, and that is not only that he is now for the last 4 years the chairman of the ICCA. Previously, he started as a treasurer. Now he really started the treasurer because I would say he is one in a row of 5. And I would like to mention this 5 person, then you can see what Jonathan did for the ICCA. And that was all ICCA, and now it is ICGA, yes? First of all, the ICCA was started by Benjamin Midman. Then he was succeeded by Monty Nieuwburner, and I would not like to tell about them. And thereafter came David Levy. And after David Levy came Tony Marsland. But thereafter come David Levy 1. I count David Levy for 1. So then we have in total with Schaefer, who was the follower the following year from David Levy, he was the 5th one. These 5 people have, I would say, done a very, very good job over the years and over the lifetime of the, I would say, the ICCA. Jonathan is also busy with, I would say, celebrating this this occasion, so for 50 years. And that is 50 years computer chess, so to speak. And the ICCA is a little bit later, but anyway, it is important that we celebrate it and that we do that. Next year. Details will be given by Jonathan. But having mentioned it, I think that the best is to thank him. Jonathan, you did a very good job, not only the last years, and you stepped down from your function as the chair. And my impolite question is, have you already a successor, or do we have already a successor? We are looking with, I would say, sharp eyes. And therefore I mentioned it also here, because I hope that we can continue still with our activities. And that contains the journal, that contains the conferences, and that contains also, of course, the championships. So that is or the Computer Olympiad. So all 3 points are very important, and I wish you much success. But going back, this is a fantastic performance, Jonathan, because we were not, I would say, in the top of our knowledge and our experience, especially after COVID, we had a kind of dip, so to speak. But now we are up and running, and that is all thanks to you. You did a very, very good job, and I would like to thank you for your efforts. Thank you, and do it with applause. I invite you to join me.
Thank you very much for your kind words, Jaap.
Dear audience, as I said already, I repeat for, I would say for Ingo, because I saw he came later in. Welcome, Ingo. We are on the start of the 3rd day of the Advancing Computer Games Conference 2023. I will be your session chair for a keynote 4 session given by Professor Tristan Cazenave. Currently, he works at the LAMSade, and probably you know that it is the Laboratoire d'Analyse et de Modélisation des Systèmes d'Aide à la Décision at the University Paris-Dauphine. Tristan and myself, and now I ask Jonathan to perform his first task, yes? Tristan and myself know each other since the beginning of the 1990s, yes? When the famous French AI researcher Jacques Pittrat visited Maastricht for the Computer Olympiad. First with 1 student, and the year thereafter with 2 students. Namely, Bruno Bougie and Tristan Cazenave. This was an asset for the Olympiad and the conference, and an excellent start for our later cooperation. Both PhD students were involved in the game of Go. They were inspired by the words of John McCarthy, who wrote in 1990 the following sentence: "The research of Go programmers is still in its infancy, but we shall see that to bring Go programs to the level comparable with current chess programs, investigations of a totally different kind than used in computer chess are needed." And they did so. John was true, and Tristan and Bruno proved him to be true. Of course, today I will concentrate on Tristan. In 1996, he defended his PhD thesis titled, in French, Recherche sélective et génération automatique de programmes. I was invited to be the foreign opponent. To honor the group and the audience, I had prepared my questions in French, but had also requested to have the discussion in English. Tristan did very well. So Jacques Pita was happy, Tristan was happy, and the ICCA was happy, since at that time we were called Computer Chess Association. Go was not, I would say, only just at the start of being in, since we felt that the statement by McCarthy started to become true by, I would say, especially this thesis. The research world went on, and so did Tristan. On January 6, 2003, Tristan defended his habilitation thesis in French. The other thesis was defended, as I said already, in 1996. So he worked on, and the title of the habilitation thesis was Recherche sélective et génération automatique de programmes. The ceremony was rather similar. I was again invited for the reading and the opposition committee. Although my French was improved, I still preferred the same procedure, questions in French and discussions in English. It became again a successful day for all of us. Meanwhile, in April 2000, Tristan started collaboration with Bruno Bougie in writing a computer Go survey for the Artificial Intelligence Journal. They had fantastic followers and inspirators. See Tristan's biography on internet, where many of them are mentioned. In 2008, Tristan became professor at l'Ambassade University Paris-Dauphine, and you know already what the abbreviation is. And after my stepping down in 2017 as editor-in-chief of the ICGA journal, meanwhile the chess was being replaced by Games, the International Computer Games Association journal. He succeeded me together with Ai-Cheng Wu and Mark Winans. As now we are here, and you understand that it is with much pleasure. I wish you, Tristan, a very good talk. And after Jonathan has done his task, his second task, then I would say the floor is yours. This is Tristan in the current position, so we have shared many things, and I wish you much success.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. Jaap, sorry. Thanks a lot, Jaap, for your introduction. I will now share my screen. And start. Okay, so the topic of my talk today is about bootstrapping artificial intelligence. So the theme of the talk will be to see various ways to improve AI using AI. So I will start with some science fiction with a citation from well-known people about bootstrapping AI. And then I will go into some of my work and the work by other people about using AI to improve AI. So the first thing where I will chronologically shows different things I have done or other people have done. So the first topic is learning for improving search. Then I will talk about search for improving search. And in the end, search for improving learning on the algorithm discovery. And I will end with a perspective on the research to do on these topics. So we can start with a very old quote from Irving John Good in 1965. So this quote is about ultra-intelligent machine, be defined as a machine that can far surpass all the intellectual activities of any man over clever. Since the design of machine is one of these intellectual activities, an ultra-intelligent machine could design even a better machine, then would be unquestionably be an intelligence explosion. On the intelligence of one we left far behind. So the first ultra-intelligent machine is the last invention that man ever need make, provided that the machine is docile enough to tell us how to keep it under control. So this is an interesting quote, but there are two problems about this. First, it thinks of an ultra-intelligent machine as a machine that can do everything and which has no limitation in any domain, which is quite weird given the current state of artificial intelligence, where machines are much better at some tasks than at other tasks. On the end of the quote is even more weird because it gives to machines capabilities that humans have, that they are not docile, even if current machines are docile. So I give this quote for because this is an old quote about using machine to build even better machine, but it has some default. So Jacques Pittrat, in 2019, he wrote a blog on bootstrapping artificial intelligence. And one of the things he says is one day we will have an artificial AI researcher which will advance AI much better than ourselves. So it's a strong statement. So this is still a science fiction because it is not yet what we can do. And he says he is working since many years on such a system, so Kaya, which is chercheur artificiel en intelligence artificielle, so an artificial researcher on artificial intelligence. And he says if we succeed for Kaya, AI will improve much more efficiently than we are painfully trying to develop it. So this is also science fiction because we don't have such artificial AI researcher. And the last quote about science fiction about the topic of bootstrapping AI is Moore's Law for Everything by Sam Altman. So it's more recent, it's in 2021. He's saying this technological revolution is unstoppable and a recursive loop of innovation as these smart machines themselves help us make smarter machines will accelerate the revolution path. So this is more modest than the Pittrat on the Irving John Good quote, but this is quite realistic about the fact that we improve the way artificial intelligence is done because we improve the tools we use for artificial intelligence. So this talk is inspired by Jacques Pittrat. So as Jaap said, Jacques Pittrat was my PhD advisor. So I may recall briefly what Jacques Pittrat did. So he defended his thesis about theorem proving on meta-theorem, so theorem to generate theorems. So it was in 1970. Then he first published a paper on the general game playing, so in 1968. So that was a founding paper for general game playing. And then he did some work in the 70s about explanation-based learning on chess, and later on meta knowledge, so knowledge about knowledge. His idea was to use a system that observes itself in order to improve itself. And he wrote systems that use meta-knowledge and self-observation, which were called Massist and Malice, that were solvers that were using reasoning on their own reasoning in order to improve. So in the end of his life, he worked mainly on the Kaya, so the artificial researcher in artificial intelligence. And you can see a blog he wrote on this web page, so bootstrappingartificialintelligence.fr. So this talk is in memory of the work of Jacques Pittrat and how he inspired my research and the research of others. So we shall first start with learning for search.
Tristan,
So
I have
in
a short,
1996,
Tristan, I have a short remark, and that is for also Chinese and Japanese audience, because your slides are impeccable. They are fantastic, just so they can follow your story quite completely. But they have sometimes, I'm sure, difficulties with understanding your English because you are too fast. Not that the English is not good, everything is good, but you are so fast that if you are, I would say, from Japan or from China, then you have difficulties to understand it immediately. Dus so try to speak a little bit slower. And I give you a little bit more time at the end.
Okay, thanks, yeah. Let's first see how our learning can improve search. So in my thesis in 1996, my system was named Introspect, and it was learning to play Go from zero knowledge by using self-play. So it used self-observation to improve itself. And the way to improve itself was to produce an explanation of how a game was solved in order to generate new theorems for these games. So this was theorem proving applied to the game of Go, and using this machine learning, symbolic machine learning and theorem proving, it was able to generate hundreds of thousands of lines of C++ in order to solve Go problems. So that was the first step in learning to search in the game of Go. Then I rewrote my system in 1998 about using partial evaluation of the rule of Go to directly generate knowledge from scratch. So this was theorem proving in first order logic, and it generated the same kind of knowledge as learning in my thesis. And in 1999, I generated logic metaprograms that could generate logic program in order to have a more efficient generation. So this partial evaluation is something which is quite well known. We can use a reference which is Futamura projection that a Japanese researcher named Futamura proposed in 1971. So it was about specializing interpreter in a given language. So when you have an interpreter on a partial evaluator, you can use partial evaluation of the interpreter to produce a version of the interpreter that only run a given program. So it is a compiler by using partial evaluation of the interpreter. So this is the first Futamura projection. So this is specializing an interpreter for a given source code, so yielding an executable. The second Futamura projection is specializing the specializer for the interpreter. And if you do that, then you produce a compiler. And then the third Futamura projection is specializing the specializer for itself. So it's a yield tool that can convert an interpreter into a compiler. So I had fun with this Futamura projection since I worked on partial evaluation. And what I can propose today is a GAM-AI projection. So you have a program that is a generating program that takes some GAM rules to generate knowledge about this game, so theorem about this game using the GAM rules. So you can define following Futamura 3 GAM-AI projection. The first projection is generating programs for given GAM rules. The second projection is specializing the program generator on the GAM rule, on a given GAM rules, to have a faster program generator for a game. And the third GAM-AI projection is specializing the specializer for the program generator to have a better specializer. So we can adapt the Futamura projection to the generation of theorems in games. Now I will dive into another topic, which is a search for search, but which is related to the first topic. So the idea is to use search to improve search. So this is what I done in the paper I published in 2000. So I did the same thing as I did with program generation and theorem proving, but instead of using theorem proving to generate knowledge, I used search to simulate that knowledge. So the paper was called Abstract Proof Search, and search replaces generated knowledge. So Thomas Thompson, he did some work about that, and he had the idea of using relevancy zones in his 2001 paper, and the relevancy zones are equivalent to the explanation in explanation-based learning. So this are the explanation of why a search is successful, and to invalidate this search, you have to invalidate the explanation, which is very selective about the move you can try in a search. Another use of search to improve search was my nested Monte Carlo search algorithm. So the idea here is to use Monte Carlo search to improve Monte Carlo search. So in 2007, I called it reflexive Monte Carlo search, and it was improved in 2009 with nested Monte Carlo search. So in order to understand nested Monte Carlo search, we can use this example. So on the left, you have the root and you have 3 possible moves. And after each possible move, you do a random game that gives you a score, and you want to maximize the score. So here you have 10, 10, and 20 as scores. So you choose the move to the right, which leads to 20. So you play the move to the right, and then you are in another state, and you still have 3 possible moves. And each of the possible moves, they gave 20, 30, and 10. And then 30 is the best, you choose 30, and you continue like that until a terminal state. So this is a level 1 nested Monte Carlo search. So in order to understand nested Monte Carlo search of level greater than 1, what you can do is say that a level n Monte Carlo search use a level n-1 playout in order to choose its move. So this is a generalization at any level of this kind of behavior. So it had multiple applications. So an example of an application of nested Monte Carlo search is retrosynthesis. So this is retrosynthesis is finding a set of chemical reactions that enable to synthesize a given molecule. So the state space of retrosynthesis is an Andor tree. So this is the same kind of trees than in games. And people have used Monte Carlo tree search and depth first proof number search to find a retrosynthesis path. So there was a paper by Segler-Preuss in 2017 called a system called AlphaShem and IZFinder, which is a system by AstraZeneca that was published in 2020 and which is open source. So we modified IZFinder in order to use nested Monte Carlo search, and this gives this result. So here you have the time required on the x-axis, and you have the number of molecules that could be synthesized on the y-axis. So here you see that nested Monte Carlo search gives better results than the Monte Carlo tree search used in IZFinder. So this is a kind of application that we are happy to work on. So there are many other applications of nested Monte Carlo search in different domains like biology and cryptography or other or in games. So in 2011, Chris Rosin, he built a nested Monte Carlo search to create nested rollout policy adaptation. So the idea of NRPA, nested rollout policy adaptation, is to bootstrap the policy. So there are nested level of policies and of sequences of action. So at each level, you have a policy on the best sequence of action found at this level, and you adapt the policy to the best sequence of action. So here is Chris Rosin receiving the Best Paper Award at ISHCAI 2011 from Toby Walsh. And in this paper, so he described nested rollout policy adaptation, and he break the world record at Morpion Solitaire. So Morpion Solitaire was a puzzle that was popular in France in the 70s. And using this algorithm, he could improve by 10 moves the previous record. So nested rollout policy adaptation has also many applications. So one of those applications where we worked on this application in 2020 is inverse folding. So the goal of inverse folding is to find RNA sequences that have a given folding. So the folding of a molecule is important in biology because it gives properties of the molecule. So Eterna comes from a video game that was made by people from Stanford. And in these video games, you have puzzles with RNA molecules that fold into a specific shape. So here you have, for example, two puzzles from Eterna. One is a star and the other is a Star Wars ship. So this is the kind of shape that you want to find. Another application is in network traffic engineering. So in network traffic engineering, you want to route packet on the internet. So you have the graph of the internet network, and you have a value for each arc in the graph. And the protocol is to use the shortest path in the graph in order to route a packet. And we have a very good result with nested rollout policy adaptation for this problem, having much better results than the local search for large graph. So this is a thesis which is defended next week at Orange, so the internet service provider in France. Yes, a funny application too is something we published with Miloro Querol last year, which is a refutation of spectral graph theory conjectures. So in spectral graph theory, there are many possible conjectures that can be automatically generated by programs specialized in this generation of conjecture. And the goal is to remove the conjectures that are false. And the Monte Carlo search can be used to generate graphs that refute given conjecture. So we had a success with this approach in refuting various conjectures about spectral graph theory. So nested rollout policy adaptation has many applications. So we can see the kind of application that we have seen on others, such as vehicle routing problem or slicing on the 5G network. So this was how to use search for improving search. And now we may go on how to use search to learn. So one of the use of search in order to improve learning is neural architecture search. So this is a search algorithm that search for neural network architectures. And neural architecture is very important for the performance of game playing programs. So here you have an example taken from the AlphaGo 0 paper, where there is a comparison between the AlphaGo networks, which are a convolutional network, and networks that use residual connection, and networks that use two heads. One is a policy head, the other is the value head. So you see that both improvements, they give 600 Elo improvement to AlphaGo, and they are cumulative. So it's very important for game programs to use appropriate architecture for neural networks. So there are many papers on the use of search for discovering effective neural network architecture. So this is the first kind of search that can be used to improve learning. So the other one that we know very well in computer games is expert iteration. So it's a paper by Anthony in 2017. So the idea is to use an expert to train a model. And the expert is doing a search with the model in order to generate data of better quality and to learn the policy and the value from this data generated by, for example, a Monte Carlo tree search. So this is the algorithm used in AlphaZero to learn to play Go, chess, and shogi. So this is a paper taken from the AlphaGo 0 paper. You can see that it does self-play, so it it plays against itself, and it uses the distribution of the moves in a Monte Carlo search to learn the policy, and the result of the self-played game at the end to learn the value. There was a re-implementation of AlphaZero in 2020 called Polygames by people from Facebook Fair. That was applied to many games and that use some innovation like a fully convolutional policy head instead of a dense network at the end of the policy head. A global average pooling for the value head, so that makes it invariant to the board size, and as a result, it has beaten the best Havana player. So another kind of search that is used for self-play is in the Athénon program. So this is the program I work with Quentin Cohen-Solal. So with this program, we had 16 gold medals this year at the Computer Olympiad. So here is a list of games where we had gold medals. So for various games, we have a very effective learners that learn to play games by self-play from zero knowledge. So the difference between Athénon and AlphaZero is in the search algorithm. So we use unbounded minimax, which is a minimax, a best first minimax search. That was the paper was published 30 years ago, maybe by Korf. And the principle of unbounded minimax is to backpropagate the value as a minimax, but to extend the principal variation. So the idea is to take the best move by both players and you extend the leaf at the end of this series of best move. So this is an asymmetric growing of the search tree, just like Monte Carlo tree search does, but this is a different search algorithm. And the other particularity of Athénon is the use of the descent algorithm to generate knowledge. So it only uses a value network. It does self-play without prior knowledge. And it generates much more data to be learned during self-play than the AlphaZero way to learn a policy and a value. So it keeps the score inside the trees developed by the unbounded minimax in order to generate data to learn. So it is more efficient than AlphaZero in learning for the games that we have seen. So this is described in Hamas paper this year, which is called Minimax Strikes Back, where we describe how effective Athénon is at generating knowledge and learning to play various games. And in the end, so we can use this kind of algorithm for algorithm discovery. So the idea is to use an algorithm to discover an algorithm. So AlphaZero and Mu0, they can be used to play the game of algorithm discovery. So people from DeepMind, they applied it to problems. So last year, there was a Nature paper about Monte Carlo tree search and deep reinforcement learning to discover fast matrix multiplication algorithm. So they define the tensor game, where the goal is to find algorithms that multiply matrices very efficiently. So they use the same algorithms that they use in games for this algorithm discovery. And this year, they published AlphaDev, where they use also this kind of algorithm to discover new, faster sorting algorithms. I did some work on algorithm like Monte Carlo tree search to evolve and to find new Monte Carlo tree search algorithms, so new bandits. So that was the work I did in 2007 about inventing new bandits for Monte Carlo tree search with genetic programming. And the funny thing to do would be to use nested Monte Carlo search to discover new bandits. So that would be a Monte Carlo search algorithm that would discover new Monte Carlo search algorithm. So in the context of bootstrapping AI, that could be fun. Another way to use AI to improve algorithm discovery is to use a large language model. So Baptiste Rosier was my PhD student some years ago. So he defended in July 22 about using LLM for translation of programming language, so for generating code. So LLMs, they are quite efficient at code generation. So you have example like Copilot, ChatGPT, or CodeLama. And this year, I have a new PhD student, so Kylian Susini, who will work on his thesis about search on large language model for automatic code generation. So we may have some interesting thing coming using this kind of model for code generation. So in the perspective of all this work, there are many possibilities to extend research. So for example, we could use Athena for combinatorial optimization problem, or we could use Athena for algorithm discovery, since for some games it is better than the AlphaZero approach. Then maybe it could also be interesting for algorithm discovery, since Mu0 and AlphaZero can be used for that. As I already said, Monte Carlo search can be used to discover bandits, so to improve Monte Carlo search. And we can combine search and LLM for algorithm discovery, as will do Kylian in his PhD. The other kind of thing that we can do that are follow-up to this presentation is to generate on-game knowledge for games, generating symbolic on-game knowledge, so symbolic retrograde analysis, and try gamma I projection, so the Futamura projection for gamma I. So in the end, what we can have from this talk is that we have search and learning that reinforce each other, and that has many applications in games and in various combinatorial optimization problems that have some interest in real life. So bootstrapping, so using search to improve learning, using the same model that improves by self-play, gives superhuman program. And we have example of bootstrapping that improves the system by using the system itself. And from a more general point of view, we can have AI algorithms that discover new algorithms. So that was done by people from DeepMind this year and last year, and we will probably have more development to this kind of AI. So AI can discover new algorithms, but AI can also improve AI. So I'm eager to look at result in this field in the future. So that's the end of my talk. So maybe I stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Keynote Speaker. You did very well, and I would say, I'm absolutely sure that you have invoked many questions, and therefore I would like first to give the public Jacob van der Pol. He said something. I give the floor to Jacob van der Pol.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I wrote it in the chat, but I can read it aloud. So I was at the ICAT 23 conference on silicon design, and NVIDIA and AMD both showed how they use large language model to generate next generation processors, which will enable more AI. So that's very much in the spirit of what you presented. But my question would be, how can we say something about the correctness or the safety of such generated code? I mean, can we do anything else than just testing it, or how do we trust it?
Yes, currently my view on this is testing. So yes, so LLM generated code is not safe. So it can be buggy, it can be incorrect. There can be many problems with the generated code. But my view on this is that you can use LLM as a prior for Monte Carlo research, and you evaluate the algorithm generated by Monte Carlo Research with the LLM prior in order to see if it fulfills its goals. So, for example, in the sorting algorithm, they use the sorting of small lists, and they verify that all lists are sorted correctly. So this is the kind of thing you can do for simple algorithm, but for more difficult algorithm, testing takes a lot of time, so it's less doable.
Thank you.
Is that an answer? What is, I would say, to your question? You are fully satisfied?
Yeah, no, yeah, I'm not satisfied with the situation, but I think it's realistic that we can basically do testing. But on the other hand, if you generate code, then you could take the code itself to analyze, which is easier than checking the AI system. So there's some hope maybe for verification. But yeah, thank you.
There's some hope for verification. That will be your ended conclusion, so to speak. Okay, but there are more questions. I saw also Ingo.
So Ingo asked about AI-generated game design. Is Cameron here? So yes, you have the rule of games, for example, that are used in Ludi, where you could try to generate rule as in a game description language. So this can be Ludi, this can be GDL, and I think an LLM would generate quite a different rule, but we have to. So it's difficult, as in generating code, to evaluate the interest of the game that has been generated. So this is the same thing. So we have to use a lot of search and a lot of self-play on the measure of how interesting is a game in order to select the games that are generated. So the difficulty is not much in the generation of the game, but in the evaluation of how interesting is the game. So if Cameron is here, maybe he has something to say about this.
Yeah, I agree totally. Generating new games is very, very simple, but even testing whether they play can be difficult, let alone whether they're interesting. And people are already starting to use large language models to generate new games with Ludi, but the results aren't convincing so far.
Yeah. So evaluating the interest of a game, I think this is an open question.
Yep.
So this is difficult to do automatically.
Yep.
Have you seen the question by Frank Lans on the screen? You mentioned explanation several times. Could you talk about the kind of explanation that these systems were capable of generating?
So yes,
So could you give
the
some
explanation
examples?
is yeah. So it is my work from my PhD thesis. So this was an explanation-based generalization. So the idea is that so I was proving theorems about the game of Go. And this was symbolic, so this was rules. On these rules, they had a set of conditions. And this set of conditions was the explanation of why you can have a winning move, for example. So explanation can be a set of literals that gives the reason why the move is a good move or is a move that solves the game. In the context of lambda search or the abstract proof search, an explanation is the set of intersections on the board that are responsible for a winning move. So this is equivalent to the set of literals in theorem proving, but this is much easier to use and to use in order to select the interesting move out of all the possible moves. So explanation can either be a set of literals in rules or relevancy zone, as in lambda search, where you have all the intersection in the board responsible for conclusion.
Okay. I go to the next question. That's by Peter van Ende Boas. I know him very well. Welcome, Peter. I will read your question, and if there is some discussion, then you are welcome to, I would say, to interrupt Casanova. Where in the system do you test for efficiency? During generation, or as a standalone tool connected to the system? So,
yes. So in general, so if it is about generating rules, we have efficiency, which is a real concern, because the first rules that are simple, they are very often used and very simple to match. But if you generate millions of rules, then you have an efficiency problem, because you have replaced search with a matching of rules. So what you can do is do statistics about the use of rules in order to see how much useful they are given the time to match them. So I think a good approach is to test the system in real games and do statistics about the use of rules, so as to only keep the best rules.
Peter, is that okay?
So this is more than connected to the system.
Peter, you agree with that? Oh, he cannot talk. Okay. The next one, that is from Leo. Yes. First of all, thanks on the MCTS thing. A naive question: how to evaluate a generated or searched board game is good or of interesting to players?
Yes. So this is a difficult question, because so we know that some games are boring. So if one player always wins, whatever it happens, this is a boring game. But this is difficult to know that a game is interesting for human players or not. So we can have measure like how much the living of the game changes between self-played games or things like that. But there is not definitive measure of how good a game is. On the MCTS for combinatorial optimization, yes, I published many papers about MCTS for combinatorial optimization. So there are many different applications of MCTS. And if you look at Google Scholar and you type Monte Carlo research, you see that there are currently many papers doing MCTS for various combinatorial optimization problems. So it goes from designing quantum computers to biology. So very varied applications.
Okay. I returned for a while to my friend Peter van den Boas. I know him very well, and he is a persistent student, and now he's a persistent researcher. And he said, yes, my question for computation for efficiency is okay, but I meant in fact computational efficiency. And do you have to add something with you have a focus on computational efficiency?
Yes, well, what I was talking was computational efficiency. So it was the time, the computation time used to match rule versus the interest of using this rule, so how often it matches. So this is definitely computational efficiency. Yes, it's
I have two more questions in the QA. If AI can improve AI, it needs people to judge and develop it. So what is the role of people? What is the role of people? Or are we, I would say, out of question?
So the role of people is to design AI systems that design AI.
The question is, that's not a question. You said in your final conclusions, you said AI can improve AI, yes? That we understand all.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
If we have a sequence over there, yes, then has that sequence an end? What is the end of the sequence? That in fact is here his question here. He just not formulated that way, but he would like to see whether there is a limit at the sequence.
Yeah, maybe there is a fixed point. So it comes where
let me go. I take your hand. Yes, I take your hand. And we start first of all. You said in the perspectives. Yes, you said in perspective 3. You said generate endgame knowledge for games. That was one of the perspectives you said. Okay, and that's fine, of course. So I'm happy with that. My first question, of course, when I looked at is, well, can we solve the game of chess? And why I asked that, because chess, in fact, is not only anything else than a 32-piece endgame. It is an endgame with 32 pieces.
Yeah.
And why should it not be an endgame? And if that is an endgame, you said here, the perspective is generate endgame knowledge for games. Now, I would like to have the knowledge of what is the solution of the game of chess.
Yeah, so if we use a retrograde analysis, probably that we will have to generate tons of data. So this is not memory feasible to generate all kind of retrograde analysis with current computers. But I think chess can be solved not so far from now. So that's my opinion. But probably it will do both different kind of things, like selecting very efficiently the moves to search for. So if we have a very fast move sorter that can sort move almost perfectly, then maybe we can do something.
If you still read the ICCA journal, and I hope so, then of course in the October number, on the October issue, you saw that I wrote there as a report of the International Computer Correspondence World Championships, that I expect that, and that was a repetition of my statement already in 2007, that chess will be solved before January 1, 2035. Is that coincides with your expectation?
So no idea when it will be solved, but I think it's possible, yes.
Okay. Then we go to Dimitri Russen. That's in, if you have the phone, your button on the question and answers, then you see AI can improve AI. Sounds very efficient, but also dangerous. For the safety of humans, do you think we should put some effort into designing, for example, Monte Carlo tree search in such a way that it does not improve itself too quickly?
No. I think that yes, this is a science fiction thing I said in the beginning. So the citation by Irving John Good, which looks at AI system as if they were humans. So they have nothing to do with the way humans think or act, and they are much under control. So I'm not sure about using AI to improve AI.
Do you think AI improvement could be compared with setting a fire?
So settling a fire. So what is the connection?
You said one AI program improves another one, and improves another one, and improves the third one, etc. If we start a fire, then of course the fire is, so to say, broadening itself. Yes, and then at some time the whole world is fire. That is what he mentioned. No, not mentioned what he means.
So, yeah, I think that if we succeed in having AI to improve AI, so we will have very, very strong AI. And this is already the case in games like Go, chess, or shogi. And we have a superhuman AI because this system were designed by an AI improving on AI.
I have an anonymous participant, and he has a question. Now, for all of us, yes, for drawn games, a complete solution via databases wouldn't be required. No. So we only have to determine it's a draw, which can be done with Monte Carlo. Done maybe with Monte Carlo and knowledge-based approach, opening theory. He said so. That is an anonymous participant, but I think there are a few things which we could have as objections to this statement. But I leave it to you because I'm not the answer. You're the answers. See you his statement is so. I give the floor to you to I would say to talk with him or her. Het is een anonymous participant.
Okay.
The same anonymous participant said, okay, sorry, yes, the examples, chess, draws, and Go may be, he said. Now we talk about Go. Could you say any wise word on Go? Because we talked today on Go, yes, but I now mean we are in the area far away from here, from solutions. Do you
solution?
Yes, the floor is yours.
Yes. Solution to Go is tough, yes. Yes, small board solution maybe, yes. I don't know, maybe 7x7 or 9x9 Go, maybe.
Yes,
maybe
okay.
we can have a solution to small board Go. But so we already have solution to very small board Go. But so yes, I think a reasonable try is to solve, yes. So, for example, 9x9 Go would already be fantastic. So it's a very, very hard to solve.
Yesterday we had the start of a discussion on, I would say, putting dominoes, etc. So on a board or whatever, and then we could have done a competition, and then most of the time it was the first player wins the game. But there were a few exceptions, and that was, of course, that the second player wins the game. Yes. And now my question in that time already was, what are the characteristics of a game where I would say it is won by the second player? Because I divided in that time the set of games into two parts. The set of games won by the first player, yes, and won by the first player, then it is the initiative, which is the determining factor. And the second game is the class of games won by the second player. And if you have the second player, then if you chess is a good example, then sometimes you have in pawn end games, you have zugzwang, yes? And I told yesterday that Victor Alles also told that for the game of Connect 4, also zugzwang hold. In the final end of his research, he discovered that it was a win for the first player. So he was wrong. But I know, I guided him during his research, and then you tell everything, what you think, what you expect, actually, will not keep you alert. So he was always alert, Victor. But now we came to these things, when is a game a zugzwang? And then you see, if you look at all the games, very rarely it occurs that a game is a zugzwang game.
So for Go, we have the commis. So the commis let you decide if this is a first or second player game. And if you take the right integer commis, then this is a null game. So this is a draw game. So if you play perfectly, then this is a draw. But if you don't play perfectly, then it's a win or a loss. So that's an interesting point for Go, where you can, by setting the commis, either have first player, second player, or draw.
Okay, I understand what you say. Yes, first of all, I have a few, I would say, encouraging communications here. Peter van Bouwer said he is okay with your answers. So that's always good to know that, I would say, the answers are not given for nothing. And Frank Litz also, if you have told which games are good, and then he said 2035 with question mark. And what is your opinion on 2035 with solving the game of chess?
So, looks possible.
It's possible. Okay, now let me comment on this possible. Yes. Okay. For the moment, I don't see any questions. If there is a participant who still has questions, then it is now the time is ready to do so. Let me otherwise ask, what do you think is the biggest challenge for AI, which is reachable in, I would say, the next, say, 70 years? So, I mean, up to 2040. What would be the most impressive performance made by an AI program?
I think one of the most interesting thing in AI is to application to biology and chemistry and designing new drugs that would fight against diseases. That would be a great achievement.
So in the medical world, in medical application.
Yeah, in the medical world, yes.
Yes, yes. Okay, now that's a very challenging but also good answer, I believe, because there we have quite a lot of things to win, so to speak. Yes. I do not have any questions more, and I would not like to have all questions that I'm only posing a question. Do you have a question on, I would say, the future? What is your prevalent question for future researchers?
So my future.
I would say you have a very gifted, talented PhD student, let's say an AI program, yes? So what challenging task should you give that AI program as a task for research? Because writing the PhD thesis is nowadays not difficult anymore.
No, I think that AI is very diverse and there are so many interesting things to do that I'm confident that I can have many PhD students doing very different and very interesting things.
Once more, what do you say? Many things are interesting, that's true.
I say that, yes, PhD students, they can do many very different and interesting things. So there are many things that I can give PhD students to do.
Okay. Before I thank you, I have a personal question to you. Yeah. You wrote in your biography that you, I would say, guided many PhD students, and you wrote a little bit about that, and with respect, that belongs also. But nowadays there is a change in guiding the PhD students, because soon you will have, I would say, PhD students, they use Grammarly, for instance, for their thesis. Yes? And also we see already some journals, some editors of journals, they advise when they give, I would say, comment on your drafts version, but also please check it also with Grammarly. So it is already in use in the publication world. What is your opinion on that, and how do we continue?
So as long as it helps do better writing and better things, why not? But we have to be cautious that it does not degrade the thing you do or you tell in your papers or in your PhD. So my opinion is that we have new tools, so we may use it, but you may be careful when using it, not using it blindly.
From the scientific point of view, I absolutely support your statement, and especially we have new tools, so we should use the new tools. But anyway, you know, from all new tools, we also have sometimes, and that is my other part, you know, with law and computer sciences, we also need new ruling, yes? And now the question is, do we have new ruling for assigning some people a PhD title?
So finding a PhD title?
What? Now, nowadays, we have the PhD title is, in fact, I briefly said that you do research, you write it down in the thesis, and the thesis should be officially defended, yes? And apart from all kinds of things which you have, but that is the idea. And so the quality of the PhD thesis is judged by a committee of, I would say, readers. But nowadays, a good PhD student already take care of a good quality because he has sufficient help from outside. And so now the question is, to what extent do we hand over, do we assign doctor's titles to people who, in the old-fashioned time are not eligible for the title, but nowadays they have, with the help of tools, they have it. They could apply for it.
Yeah. But the tools are there, so you have to cope with.
It is not for you to answer it strictly, but it is more, I would say, a message for everybody to close this session, and that you go out and that you say, okay, I consider this, and that is a compliment to your talk, of course. Fantastic, challenging session with challenging questions and with challenging answers also. And thank you for giving Jacques Pittrat, the honor which I would say should he should have. He had it already for many people also during his life, but nevertheless, it is good to remember him as a great French AI researcher. Thank you for your contribution, and thank the audience for being here. And thanks Jonathan once more for, I would say, having the closing words. And then my words are thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Tristan. And I close this session now. And I think that in half an hour, now 22 minutes or so, we reassemble here. Jonathan, you are the boss of the bosses.